Okay. Now let's welcome our main speaker, Jeanne.
Hi, my name is Jeanne. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Jeanne. Hi. Yeah, this is the Playa del Rey show. Everybody that's been up here is from Playa del Rey. There's a few more coming, too, a few more that need to be here. I'm going to take a minute, and I'm going to ask my God to come in and sort of cleanse my soul and let me be open and let my spirit show, and keep me from editing my story, because there's a few people in this room that I'd like to impress. And I'm going to ask him to speak the words that he'd have me speak tonight. And if you would take that time and have God open your ears so that you can hear whatever it is that you need to hear tonight. If you'd take that time with me. Thank you. Yep, it works every time. I feel so much better. Now I could tell you anything, because it'll be his fault. He made me say it. You know how we are as alcoholics. If there's something wrong here, I got to look up to see whose fault it was, because I know it wasn't my fault. I hope I'm learning a little different. I do want to start my story a little different today, because it's just how I feel and it's my option. I just want to explain how much I adore Alcoholics Anonymous too, and the friends it's given me, and the peace and serenity that I have today, even when everything is in an uproar. I realize that God has got something beautiful planned for me. And from where I come from, that is not my nature. You know, my background, as you'll hear tonight and when I talk to you, is not somebody who, you know, grew up with the idea that I have a spot in this world and it's, you know, there for me. I learned that from you guys. You know, you taught me how to be responsible enough for myself to change my life and to do the work that I needed to do here. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for that. And I want to express my desire for all of you to have a wonderful holiday. No matter what's going on or how you feel about it, you know, just try to practice loving and caring nature. That gets us through a lot. Anyway, I was born in Detroit, Michigan in 1938. That's rigorous honesty. And I was orphaned very early. My brother and sister and I moved in with my grandmother. My dad dropped us off there because he was going into the Navy. It was during the war. I was born, like I said, in 38. So in 40, I was almost 2. And he moved us in with my French, Irish, Catholic grandmother. And he moved my mom and us 3 kids in there with the idea that he probably wouldn't see us again, because he was going off to the war. They already had problems in their marriage, and it was more or less a separation or divorce, as well as him going into the service. A year later, my mom had to go to work. She worked in the Detroit Federal Building, downtown Detroit, Michigan. And she fell in love with some guy and decided to leave with him. And my French, Catholic, Irish grandmother said, you can go live a life of sin, but you're not taking these 3 beautiful babies with you. They're going to stay right here with me. You go on. When you get your head screwed on straight and, you know, do what you need to do, you come back and you can have your kids back. And my mom left. And to this day, I've never laid eyes on that mother. My grandmother died 6 months after this happened, leaving us kids truly orphaned. And we went into an orphanage. And it was quite some time before St. Vincent de Paul, which was the orphanage that I grew up in, came to get us, because my mom's youngest brother, an uncle of ours, was capable of taking care of us to some extent. And they didn't find out that we really needed help until it was kind of too late for us. My first three months of in that orphanage, I was hospitalized, my sister too, because we had rickets, we were malnourished, we hadn't had care. And finally we went into the orphanage and then into foster homes. And I'd like to tell you that the people that took us into these foster homes took us in because they wanted to have a beautiful family and raise some nice kids. The truth of the matter is, times were real tough back there and back then. And a lot of the women in Michigan, their husbands were in the service. They were away. They had a lot of farm area. They had, you know, all kinds of food and places for kids to run wild, but they didn't have money. So they took kids in for cash flow. You know, they got $8 a week for us. They'd take 2 or 3 kids the similar age of their kids. We'd get our clothes from St. Vincent de Paul, which they'd send away for, you know, new suits, snowsuits, and so forth. Their kids would get them first, and we'd get them next. So very early I learned that Catholicism wasn't all it cracked up to be either, you know. People didn't walk like they talked. They were all Catholic homes. It was Catholic. The only real constant thing my whole life was my Catholicism. I was raised in Catholic school, you know, had a wonderful education because of that. But due to the fact that we weren't really brought in as part of the family, we moved around a lot. I was in 12 different homes before I was 9 years old. And, you know, that's a lot of change. I learned very early in life to do what you wanted me to do. You know, I learned how to people please. I had it honed to an art. If you tell me don't step on that rug, I'm not saying I never stepped on that rug, but you never caught me stepping on that rug. You know, so I learned how to be devious, manipulative, self-protective, all the things that we do to keep that, you know, edge around us so that people can't get through to hurt you. And when you do that, you can't get out and they can't get in. And so I had this big wall, you know, that by the time I was 16, that nobody really touched me. I'd find out a lot about you, and I'd learn how to, you know, what you needed or what you wanted from me, if I had to be funny or cute or whatever, you know, and I learned to protect myself. I grew up with the idea that if one was good, 5 is better, you know, and that's kind of the thought process that I brought into my drinking, too. When I was 16, I married the first guy that asked me. Somebody asked me later in life, you know, my sponsor, as a matter of fact, Jeanne, did you ever love this guy? Why did you marry him? And I thought about it, and I couldn't remember, did I ever love him? It was more like he was an orphan. He was from Ohio, and that's pretty exotic. He was... He was tall, dark, and handsome. Well, he wasn't very tall, but 2 out of 3 aren't bad. He had been married before, so he knew what a bad marriage was like, and he wanted a good one, and so did I. He wanted to have kids. He'd been an orphan, too, and he was raised by a woman doctor back in Ohio. And he told me he worked for the post office, which all those things meant a lot to me. I found this all out in 2 weeks' time, I might add. You know, we went to a couple of drive-in movies and sat in the car a lot. And he told me he worked for the post office. Well, in my mind, that translated to, you know, the people that worked at the post office, their kids always they were well-dressed and they were clean, and they came from that nice home, you know, that had that warm glow in it, the white picket fence around it. These were people who worked at the post office. I went, you know, this means this is a career. He's going to be there forever. And so he took me across the state line to Angola, Indiana, and married me. Oh, and another reason I married him, he worked at Coney Island hot dog stand. I worked at Coney Island hot dog stand, and he came in as a customer, and he was a good tipper. So good tipping was, you know, criteria for a good marriage, too. And so when he came home 2 weeks after he took me across the state line to marry me, he came home one day, and I'm, you know, making beans or something in the kitchen, and he goes, guess what? The job at the post office is finished. And I went, finished? No way. It's a career. What about that, you know, wind, rain, sleet, and snow business? And he said he had failed to tell me he was painting the post office, and the job was finished. And now we got to get back to Ohio, which is where he's from. And he's driving this little Plymouth, I forget what year because I like to forget those years. And we had to sell the tire and the rim of his car, you know, on the car, the spare, so that we'd have enough money to put gas in the car to get back to Ohio. Thank God, you guys, you better thank God that we're young and dumb, you know, at some point in our life. Because today I would never get in the car and go to Ohio with anybody, let alone marry him and do that. But, you know, when I got to Ohio, I found out that I was pregnant, 3 months pregnant. I found out I was pregnant, and, you know, my dreams were coming true because my whole life, by these women that I had been raised with, I was raised to grow up, to be a wife and a mother and take care of children. And because I didn't have the life that I wanted to have, I wanted to give that kind of life to my kids, and I wanted to have kids and have that family and have that feeling that I never felt. I never felt any of those feelings of love and bonding and sharing with one another. I didn't think of it that clearly then. I just thought I want to have a baby. You know, I want to have a baby and give it some good love feeling. And so that I had the first beautiful boy, Lawrence Edward Stephen and Lane, and he was born in 1956. My second baby was born in 1958, and in 1960 I had my third baby boy in Germany. Now I've got 3 kids under the age of 3. I've never been nurtured or, you know, well taken care of, so I did not have the tools to take care of my kids. I could take physical care of them, but whenever they wanted something, it was like, oh my God, is there ever going to be enough of me to go around here, you know? So here I am living in Germany by this time because my husband transferred over to Europe in the 182nd Airborne and 101st Airborne. He'd been in the 82nd. And I'm living in Germany when I have this third baby. And when it's time for us to come back to the United States, I looked at him and I said, you know what, just drop me off in Port Huron. That's where he'd pick me up. I had, you know, just drop me off my last hometown. And he was happy to do so, I think. He kept the new Ford Taunus station wagon, I might add. And he dropped me off at my girlfriend's uncle, who had helped get me out of St. Vincent de Paul so that I could marry this guy. And he had built 3 little cement block homes in Emmett, Michigan, on this little Route 2. And he let me have one of those houses for my kids and myself because he built them for his nieces, and one of his nieces had gotten married and moved off, and so he let me have this little 2-bedroom house, and it was just the most darling place. And I went, oh, this is where my life is really going to begin. I can take care of those kids. I don't have to worry about that guy anymore. I got that allotment check coming in at that, you know, in that postal thing every month, and you know, I can start making decisions how to spend this money. I don't have to wait for him to tell me what I can do with it, you know. And I'm just thinking, you know, this, I got it together now, you know. And I've got those 3 boys that I can keep that house clean. This floor reminds me of that linoleum I had in that house. Keep that house clean. Keep those kids out in the backyard so that, you know, they don't need anything from me. And when the neighbors come in, everything's going to look good. And about, this went on for a year, and it was, I look back at it really as the best time of my life. And one day I went out to get that allotment check, and it wasn't there. And I went to the, you know, local, my priest. I called the Red Cross finally. After 2 months, we're literally starving in this house. And one day I looked out, there was a knock on the door, 3 beautiful people looking like you guys with boxes of food and baskets of food. And where I came from, I can't tell you the shame that brought to me, because here I was, incapable of taking care of my own kids. People were going to have to bring me something. I opened the door, and you know, I was grateful for what they were bringing me, and I really needed what they were bringing me, but I didn't have the tools to say thank you, because of, I just felt that I wasn't being a good mother, and I wasn't taking care of my kids, and I was incapable of doing that. And this was verification. It was validation that it wasn't working. And that's what kept me from being, you know, polite and inviting them in and really thanking them and being grateful. After they left, the kids and I were grateful. We danced around that food as I put it away, and there was Cracker Jacks and toys and things for them. 3 days later, there was another knock on the door, and in my alcoholic thinking, it was like, what, do they think we're gluttons here? They're bringing us more stuff, because there was 3 people out there again. But this time, these 3 people were from ADC, Aid Dependent Children. I don't know if it even exists anymore. But it was like the state coming in and saying, you know, you've got a problem here. And I look back now, having gone through what I've gone through here in AA, and probably what they said was, Jeannie, you're in trouble here. Look at, you're incapable of making a living for these kids. You have no money. You've exhausted every measure and neighbor that's here. We're going to take the kids, put them in foster home until you can get on your feet and get an education so that you're employable. But all I heard, because my head was ringing with fear and shame, was foster home. And as soon as I heard that, I knew what I had gone through in those years that I was in foster care. And I did not want that for my kids. And so I kicked them out of my house, more or less. I mean, I just said, you know, you can't take my kids. we're still okay. My husband's going to come, which I had no idea where he was even at that point. Um, you know, you can't take my kids. And I kind of booted them out of the house. And so they left. And shortly after that, the Red Cross did get in touch with my husband and got a number for him where I could reach him. And I told him, I said, you know, 2 days ago, the people were here to take my kids. Take your kids away. You better get over here and get them. And he drove across country from Kansas City, Missouri to my house and picked up those kids. And I must tell you in all good faith that he was a good man. And I did trust my kids to him. And he asked me at that point, did I want to come too? That he could put me up in an apartment and that I could share help with the kids and so forth. But I looked at him and all I saw was he was the cause of all this problems. It was his fault that he stayed out every night and was dating somebody or going someplace. He had since sent to Germany and brought home that woman that he had been seeing in Europe. And they had married. And I didn't even know I was divorced. They had married, and they had a new life started. That's why he'd gotten out of the service in the first place, because he'd really had 6 more years to do. But he got a special discharge because he couldn't make enough money to support 2 families. So anyway, my kids went across country with him without me because I said, you know, I'm not going over there. You know, I'm not going to leave the people that I know, my support group, which was small, but the only thing I had. And I went to my girlfriend's dad or uncle owned a bar, and I went to work for them. You know, I was a hostess there. And I went back and forth to see those kids over the next 2 years, 2.5 years, and I saw my kids were well taken care of. You know, I went to their little football trophy banquets, and they were doing the things that I wouldn't have been able to provide for those kids. But every time I went over there, it was much harder. You know, I'd take those whites to stay awake, you know, on that Greyhound bus 14-hour trip, and I'd clean my apartment perfect before I went so that everything would be in order when I got home. And I'd take a little bottle of Southern Comfort with me, and every time that bottle got a little bigger going over there, because my thought process was I'm gonna have to say goodbye to these kids. This would be on my way. I'd be so far into the future, I'd already be saying goodbye to them. And so that pain that I knew I was going to be seeing in a few days was already in me, you know. And my alcoholism grew worse. I did whites. I did a few things, you know, that we don't talk about from the podium here, except in the Marina Center, in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I always drank. No matter what I did, I drank. And booze was the only answer for me. I was not a druggie. I smoked dope maybe 8 times in my career, one of them after I'd gotten sober, and had to set my sobriety date back. But you know, alcohol was my answer, and alcohol worked for me. You know, I was taller, thinner, lovelier, you know, better natured when I drank. It was just that simple. And you know, I used things my whole life. I used from the time I was a little kid. It was I wanted to stay out late and play tag and run and be crazy, you know. I used education, I used reading, I used candy. Every step of my life, God provided me with something that kept me out of self, you know, kept me out of my head. Well, actually out of my heart and in my head. Anyway, so I'm going back and forth and seeing those kids, and the last time I got there, it was like a 14-hour bus trip. I'd stayed up the night before, partying with the band, you know, drinking with the band. I'd stayed up all night. I took a couple whites. I got some booze to go with me. You know, I packed my bag. I lost my bag on the bus. By the time I got there, you know, I was wasted, and my husband gave me that Al-Anon look, you know, that you guys dread, and that I dread. I didn't even know it was an Al-Anon look. He looked at me like, what in the hell is wrong with you? And the words out of his mouth was, Jeannie, look at you. There's nothing left of you. There's nothing left of you. I can't bring your kids to you looking like this. And he put me in a motel till I sobered up and cleaned up. And I had no new clothes. I mean, no clothes because I'd lost my bag. And the next day he brought the kids with her in the car. And he came in and he said, I can't give you the kids today. And I think, you know, we've got a good life for them, and you see that it's a good life for them. Why don't you just sign the kids over to us and we'll take care of them? And you know, there was a sense of relief. Instead of indignation and I want to fight for my babies, there was a sense of relief. I could see that I hadn't been a good mother and I didn't know how to be a good mother, and that my life was spiraling down. I could see by my own behavior that I was incapable. And and I signed that paper. I'd like to tell you that I went to every court in the country and fought for those kids, but the truth of the matter is, I signed the paper. And I took that bus trip back to Port Huron. And on the way, I did what it talks about in the big book. I closed the door on that part of my past. From then on, if you said, Jeannie, have you ever been married? I'd say yes. Do you have children? I'd say no, because I wouldn't be able to stand the look on your face, knowing what I knew not having a mother was like. And God, I'm usually not this emotional. On that bus trip, I closed the door on that part of my life. And I mourned those kids that 14 hours home. And when I got home, there was that feeling of, okay, now your life begins. And shortly after that, the guy that owned the bar next, really our competition, came in one night and he said, Jeannie, what are you doing in this town? You can't make any money here. My tissue, my toilet tissue. You can't make any money in this town. Why don't you go to Detroit? They're opening a Playboy club there. And I went, oh, I couldn't do that. He said, yeah, you could do that. And I said, well, I can't do it because I don't have the money to get down there, first of all. Secondly, I don't think they'd hire me. Oh, thank you. See how kind women are? Thank you. And he said, he gave me $100 to take that Greyhound down to Detroit, Michigan, and the Playboy Club was just opening. They were having a lot of union problems. I crossed the union line to hire, which is a horrible thing to do in Detroit, you know, the land of unions where it all started. And I crossed the union line, and Myra Wolfgang was the head of the union then, and she was like a big Russian bear, she looked like, and I had to walk right past her. But anyway, I got hired at Playboy, and I worked for them for 15 years. I traveled all over the country. It allowed me to do the kinds of things that I always wanted to do, party with the best of them, you know, met a lot of wealthy, wealthy people, opened new clubs all over the country as they opened, helped write the Playboy union contract. You know, I partied with the kinds of people that only the rich and famous party with. Detroit is a lot different than LA, you know. They don't have their movie stars walking down the street, you know. They had the Playboy bunnies, a few sports stars, and, you know, WJR, Detroit. And so we got to do a lot of things that I normally wouldn't have been able to do working for Playboy. I made great money. And, you know, I'd like to say that I went back and fought for those kids, but the truth of the matter was that the years just sort of slipped away, and I would call and find out that they were fine, and I'd get a card once in a while, or I'd send a card once in a while, but really, nobody in my life knew about these kids, because, like I said, I shut the door on that part of my life. I had a girlfriend who's still in my life today. I knew her 22 years. She did not know I had 3 children. So that's how long it was before I saw my kids again. And it was due to the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous that I have been reunited with those children, you know, and that my life has turned around and changed. Playboy worked for me for a lot of years, you know. It was that badge of I'm as good as anybody because I'm a Playboy bunny, you know, attitude. And I transferred out here to LA from Detroit after coming back from Ocho Rios, and I just was sick of those winters, you know what I mean? And I came out here, and the girls were walking down the street working at Nasty McNasty's, you know, topless. And I went, and Playboy, 3 days after I got here, I had a 10-day leave of absence. Playboy shipped all my stuff out here. And 3 days after I got here, the LA Playboy Club burned, and they had a big fire. And so they had to lay off like 40 of their own bunnies. And so I either had the choice of going back to Chicago or back to Detroit. And I went, you know what? I haven't seen Disneyland yet. I'm staying out here. And I did. And I left my husband, my second husband, Mike Timms, because he was a real alcoholic and a drug addict, you know. And if somebody was going to make my life spiral down, it was going to be me. And I said that to him, you know. I packed everything on one side of the room and everything, all my stuff on the other side of the room. And I said, you know, if somebody's going to ruin my life, it's going to be me. I didn't know how prophetic that was until I really got into my cups, you know, of drinking and not using really drinking. I was not you know, when I was on my own, I just didn't trust you enough to do your drugs. I wanted alcohol, and it worked very well for me. And I came to you as a periodic. I am what we call an Alcoholics Anonymous periodic. Of course, I didn't know that language then, but I only drank when I could. You know, when I knew I was going to have 2 or 3 days that I could really party, because I knew if I went to lunch with you and had a martini at dinner, you know, I would have an excuse as to why I couldn't go back to work, because that was just who I was. If I had one drink, my cheeks got a little pinker, and I was off and running, and that was just how it was. And if I partied, you better be ready and party too, because when I'm loose, we're all loose, you know. And that was my attitude. I was a party girl. I never drank at home before I got ready to go out like people talk about, because I wanted to be out there and really make it a party. I wanted it to forget not just who I was and where I was. You know, I wanted to have fun doing it. I wanted to take that trip with fun. I worked at I didn't go back to Playboy. I stayed out here and worked at the Ambassador Hotel and eventually at the Marriott Hotel. And I drank whenever I had an opportunity to drink. And I saw my life was, you know, a horrible existence. But I had a lot of money because I worked always, you know, in good places and for a long time. And I worked every single day. I never called in because of not drinking. Now, maybe the third day I would call in, you know, after the third day of not drinking, I might call in. But life was good. You know, life was good for me. It was working. This alcohol thing was working for me. But the insides were screaming to be who I was. And I didn't know that. I was running on fear of how I looked, fear of what you thought of me. You know, that was my disease as well as alcoholism, fear of not being able to live my life. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous because I have a friend that's in the business with me, and she came in, she and I drank together. You know, her name is Jackie Stinnett. She does not mind my breaking her anonymity. After 15 years, she and I lived next door to each other. She was my bartender where I worked, and one day she came into work and she said, "Jeannie, guess what?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "I'm sober." And I went and looked at her because when we went out drinking, well, first of all, her husband was a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and so he'd be out with the guys going to meetings every night. When Jay was going to go to a meeting, Jackie would knock on the wall, and I'd hear that knock, and I'd start putting my makeup on. Jackie wants to go out tonight. Jay must be going to a meeting. And I'd put that makeup on, and she and I'd go to the Prince of Wales or the whatever low-life bar there was happening, we were there. And Jackie was a lightweight compared to me. She drank beer out of those long neck beers, you know, Budweiser and Coors and shit. And I'm drinking bowls full of Southern Comfort with a twist, or bowls full of vodka, or whatever, you know, chapter 3, you know, whatever I was drinking, it was bowls full, and I would order it like that. Give me a bowl full. It wasn't, I want a double, give me a bowl full, and the bartenders knew, make it a bowl full, because I'm catching up. You know, I've been working serving drinks all night. Now I want to get in there, and I want to catch up to where you're at. And so that's what they do. And so when Jackie'd knock on that wall, away we'd go. And we come home 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd be carrying my shoes. Jackie'd be clomping in because she didn't care if Jay hurt her or not. You know, he's in recovery. He should have some program, you know. And we'd come home like that. And so Jackie, when she tells me that she's gone to Alcoholics Anonymous, I went, oh, my God. It was like somebody pulled my guts out. Here I am, the heavy drinker, and she's telling me she's in Alcoholics Anonymous. What does that say about me? You know, when they talk moment of clarity, it took me a while, but it was there. And so I've got this margarita, top shelf margarita going on over in the corner when she tells me at the Marriott Hotel that she's going to Alcoholics Anonymous. I had to run over there and take a little drink out of that, chug that thing, wipe that salt off, come back and say, oh, so Jackie, tell me about this AA thing you're into. And she goes, well, she said, you know, I've been going to Al-Anon all this time, and my Al-Anon sponsor told me that I'm not angry because Jay's out at a meeting every night. I'm angry because I can't drink the way I want to drink, living with a normal, you know, with an alcoholic in recovery. And so she said, you're angry, you need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And Jackie went, well, maybe I do. So she started going to Alcoholics Anonymous. She was 30 days sober when she gave me that announcement, you know. But I'm thinking to myself, my God, Jackie, if you're going to AA, you better save me 2 seats because you know how I drink. And she goes, I know. She just kind of nodded a little bit, you know. And she said, I'll tell you what. I said, well, you know I'm an alcoholic. And if you're, you know that if you're an alcoholic, then you know I'm an alcoholic. And she just kind of nodded. And I said, but I'm not ready. Oh, she said, don't come till you're ready. God forbid you don't want to go to those rooms till you're ready. She says, they got slogans on the wall. They've got bumper stickers and shit. They got all kinds of things. And she said, but I'll tell you what I'll do. She said, I'll bring you the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous because they got a lot of language in there. And if you read that, when you do come, you know, a couple years down the road, when you're ready, talk about alcohol being cunning and baffling. You guys do a pretty good job of it yourself. I can't find a big book here. But anyway, on the inside of this big book, she brought me the next day in a plain brown wrapper, of course, into the bar. She wrote on the inside cover, Dear Jeannie, I understand that this program actually works, and I'm praying that one day it'll be working for the 2 of us. What a kind thing to do, you know. When you're a cocktail waitress and you can smell yourself from the night before, you know, and the booze is coming out of your system, and somebody says a beautiful, kind thing like that to you, that they only want the best for you, you know, I had not experienced that before. And I was so grateful, and yet there was a part of me that just went, Alcoholics Anonymous, no way, I don't even want to read about it, you know. But she handed me that book, and I started reading it because I wanted to be able to tell her I'd read it. Here she was, had done this wonderful act, and I have to be, you know, do my share, which is to read it, and I wanted to be honest about that. So I took that book home, and of course I started with all good intentions, and I did it just like you guys did. I started in the back of the book, you know, and I read those stories, and, you know, it would touch the part of my heart when you spoke the language to me about your soul sickness, you know, it touched my heart. And I'd have to put that away because I couldn't stand those feelings. You know, I did not have anything adequate enough to deal with those kind of feelings at that point. So I'd put that book away, you know, and then I'd invite you all over after the bar one night, and that book would hold the door open so we wouldn't keep slamming it for the neighbors. Or when the little roller off my couch came out, you know, I'd stuck it under there to keep that thing from tipping, you know. And so that book served a lot of purpose in that course of the year that I had it. But every once in a while I'd get it out and I'd start reading again, and I'd come to a place, you know, where you guys spoke, and it would really touch me, and I learned a lot. And one day, not unlike any other night, I'm out drinking with my friends, you know, and I start telling this guy off because of what he's doing to my best buddy over here. And it dawned on me, God, Jeannie, you're out of your mind. You're so drunk that you have lost your mind. Shut up. This is none of your business. But my mouth just kept going. And, you know, I really had an out-of-body experience. I saw myself having this argument with people, and I had a clear glimpse of how sick I was, and I could not stop it. And, of course, I didn't stop drinking then. I went upstairs next door to the next-door neighbor, Bob, who had come home from Vietnam minus one leg, and he had a wooden leg and, you know, all kinds of things wrong with him, and he stayed up all night, and he loved me. He stayed up all night, and he fed his parrot and smoked dope. And so when I went to see him that night, crawled up the stairs after I had a big fight with these guys, I crawled up the stairs of my apartment, hands and knees, literally crawled up because I was too drunk to walk up there, but I wasn't done drinking. And I went next door, knocked on his door, and he goes, oh, come on in, Jeannie, happy to see me, come on. Look, he's feeding his parrot, and he's making me a big vodka tonic, and or whatever, vodka and whatever. And I sit in a bean bag, and I don't know what I said to him that night. But he threw his wooden leg at me, whatever it was. And he gave me that look like, you piece of shit, and went to bed. And I'm in my bean bag and I can't get out. You know, when you're too drunk to walk and you're in a bean bag, you're a prisoner until you're sober enough to roll out of that puppy. And I couldn't do it because I couldn't get any leverage, you know, hoist myself up because I wanted, you know how we are when we're drunk. I wanted to hoist myself up, give him a harumph, and walk out that door like, I don't need you, you know, but I couldn't do it. And so on the way home, you know, when I finally got enough, whatever, energy to get up out of that thing, and I went home and I looked down at this outfit that I had on. Now I'm in my costume that I work in. I've taken the belt off to make it a teeny bit longer because here I am at the Prince of Wales in the Harbor Room. You know, they don't give a shit what you're wearing. I've got this like swirly kind of cocktail outfit on, and I've got spills all down the front of him, either from waiting on you through the course of the night, or drinking through the course of the night, or crawling up the stairs through the course of the night, or dodging legs. You know, somehow I was, you know, just a mess. And I looked down at myself and seen this mess, and I saw my nylons, and I went in and I looked in the mirror, and I saw that, you know, glimpse of myself, of who and what I had become. And there was no place but to face it, you know, and I looked and I thought, oh my God, that hopeless, you know, what it talks about in the book that I can never remember, you know, depravity part, you know, that line that none of us can say from up here. Anyway, I thought to myself, Jeannie, you have to quit drinking, you know, but I probably said that 100 times. Maybe never out loud, but I knew in my heart and heart that I did have to. And I called those guys that I got in a fight with, because I got to face them at work the next day, you know, or that night. And I called and I said, I'm so sorry, you guys. I know you got in a big fight over that, blah, 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 blah. Oh, Jeannie, it was nothing, you know, and to them it was nothing. But there was something happened to me. And I think it was that big book, and I think it was your prayers, because my friend Jackie and Jay, when they were going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and they say that part where they pray for the alcoholic who still suffers, they would both look at each other and they would think my name, you know, and they'd done this for the past year while I was reading that book periodically. And, you know, prayer works. I do believe in divine intervention, and I believe we're all here because of divine intervention. And it works through you, as Pebbles always says, you know, it came to me through you. One alcoholic helping another. This woman and her husband reached down and pulled me up out of that den that I was in, you know, that gray world that I was living in, just trying to push myself through. So now Jackie, you know, I call Jackie and I tell her, guess what, Jackie, I've quit drinking. And, you know, she said, oh my God. Well, in the first place, one night I had a couple of glasses of champagne. We all know that's not drinking, you know, a couple glasses of champagne. It was at a shower, you know, it was at a wedding shower, and they just put a few bubbles in a glass. And so I had that just to toast the bride. I wasn't drinking. And I thought to myself on the way home, I had that glow, you know, I had that feeling of, I need more booze. Once you feed the beast a little bit, you know, the beast comes out and wants more. And so my little Volkswagen wanted to stop in every bar that I saw, everything that looked like a bar, neon light, neon Vicky would have made me stop maybe. And so I stopped. I got home and I thought, I better go to that book and read how they do it. Today I know that is chapter 5 and how it works. And I went home and I opened the book, this time at the front, and I started with the doctor's opinion, Bill's story, and I went to the chapter 5 and how it works. And when I got through chapter 5 and how it works, there's a part, the first part of it that says, there are those two who cannot be rigorously honest. Of course, that jumped out at me because that was me. You didn't know a thing about me. I was honest to the point of what was going on now, but you knew nothing about where I came from or who I was, because that was my secret, and I was going to go to my grave with it. And so I got to that part where it says A, B, and C, God could and would if he were sought. And I put that book across me. By now it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. I put that book across my chest, and I looked up to that God of my understanding then, and I said, dear God, you know these 6 secrets that are in me. You know about my kids. I cannot talk about this to anybody. And you know, come in and help, because look at where my life is. And it says here, you could and would if you were sought. I'm not seeking, I'm begging. And I had a miracle. God came in and gave me that glimmer of hope. And it happened to me both physically, mentally, and spiritually on every level that we live. And we live 3 separate lives in this life that we're in on a daily basis. And I was fed. I was nurtured inwardly. My soul was nurtured by asking God for help. And it was just that simple. I had the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had that change that it talks about, that psychic change that it talks about. The next morning, I went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up and I was okay. I was okay. I called my girlfriend and I said, Jackie, guess what? I'm sober. I'm sober. And she says, you bring that big book and your big white ass out here. And I took the big book with me to visit Jackie Stinnett and Jay Stinnett, and I spent the next 3 days with them. And they took me to my first 3 AA meetings, and they stood up with me when you asked for the alcoholic who was brand new. And they took my hand and stood up with me, and we all cried. And that was what we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous for one another. The simple message that you teach here is what I got here. I was lovingly nudged into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and from the time I first got here, it was, you got to start having responsibility for yourself. You want a good life, you got to start living a good life. You want some self-esteem, you got to do some esteemable acts. You want to have an education, you got to go back to school. You want a good life, you got to work these steps. You want to have your kids back in your life, that 9th step will do it. And the truth of the matter is, I had a woman who spoon-fed me the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous in a year's time, less than a year's time. And, I wrote that letter of amends to those kids, and, they lovingly forgave the woman who left them behind. And that 9-step letter that I wrote to those kids was actually, just not my language even. I don't know where it came from, but when it went on paper and went to those kids, I told them that I loved them, and I told them if they wanted to come and see me, even if it was just out of curiosity, that I was going to be available to them. I hadn't been available to them their whole life. I hadn't been available to anybody my whole life because I couldn't stand the look on your face with the truth, because I knew the truth would just separate us, that you'd be gone. And the fact that I can stand up here today is testimony to what Alcoholics Anonymous has done to me, the people that I have in my life, the people that I've loved in this room. There's no words to describe the fact that I never felt that kind of thing for another human being, nor was I capable of receiving it. When you looked at me lovingly, my thought would be, if you only knew, because there was so many sick secrets in my inside, that when you looked at me lovingly, I wouldn't be able to take that gaze. I couldn't receive it, because I had this wall. That wall is so far down that I can't even get it up when I want to be mad at somebody. I can't throw a stone at you when I want to, because it's so ingrained. It has changed me to a loving human being. I love the people in this room. I love this room. This is a room I chose to come to. I had to go to 3 meetings in one day in order to get my 30 meetings in a day, in a month. And so sometimes, because I work nights, would have to do 3 meetings in a day, and I'd gone to 2 meetings, an early morning meeting. I went to Claire Foundation for a noon meeting, and I came here. I picked it out of the book on my own through that front door, and you guys were here for me. And I don't remember my first meeting or anybody really reaching out, but I knew this is what I had to do, and I heard that din of Alcoholics Anonymous, that laughter, that coffee-smelling, wonderful feeling that we have in this room. Something happens to us here. And I came here thinking I'm going to give it away, and for the first time in my life, I feel safely held. And I want to thank you all for that. Thank you.